Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. This is Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by... Hold on one second. We're okay here. You don't have to do anything. I got everything under control. I'm just going to broadcast for a little while, and then I'll put everything back on cruise. Don't worry. So tonight we're gonna have a little bit of a special quick show. So Catherine, if you're still here, good that you're here. It's just a quick show. I had a really busy morning. And because the kids are off of school now, I need to pivot to a little bit of a different schedule. And that means getting to bed a little bit earlier. It means getting up a little bit earlier. And it means getting here closer to 10:10 than I've ever done in the past, than ever before. So hopefully that'll start tomorrow. But this morning we had other appointments. And so I couldn't do it in the morning, even if I was ready. I could have watched this, for example, or the long version of it. So I'm just going to watch a shorter version of it. I just want to make one point with it. I think there's probably 10 hours of gold here out of this 2-hour interview. It's two of the softest pseudo men on earth. This show that I'm going to show you right now is a little clip from Brett Weinstein's recent podcast with that dude from the Coast guy or something like that. And it is brutal. You can expect it to be brutal. But there's a couple things in there that I found from the very beginning that I wanted to at least show you. I don't know if I'm going to waste my time watching the whole thing. I think Brett Weinstein at this point is obviously part of this weird little scripted group of people that's ultimately pretending to be or actually behind this Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Health Freedom Movement fakery. Like the biology of endemicity, Brett Weinstein seems to have been put in place to find out what I know and obfuscate as much of it as possible. It's not clear whether he understands what I'm talking about and is actively involved in its obfuscation, or whether he just kind of reported back Piper and him to a third or fourth person like Kevin McKernan and Robert Malone, and then they scripted these people in return. But it does seem to be that there are certain biological ideas that they're just not able to touch because it would make everything go poof. One of those is endemicity. One of those is actually the population pyramid. One of those is the PCR test. And so we have a number of pressure points that they simply must walk away from. If you bring them up, if you talk about them with any mastery, with any depth of understanding, it's basically the end of the conversation. If you start saying things like using their PCR tests to find their variants, doesn't make you a virologist, and it certainly doesn't make them these variants real. And these are proprietary things. They're not open source, GitHub test primers. These are proprietary things, many of which the data of which is unavailable anymore because they're all gone. The EUAs were revoked and these companies went out of business. And so we are in an extraordinary situation where we are slowly but surely, this part of our history is starting to be so far in our rearview mirror that we can't usefully look back on it and think about what really happened and maybe even investigate what really happened. The murder it's getting older and older. The evidence trail's getting older and older. And as you know from your, from watching TV shows and murder mysteries, that's a real bad sign. That's a real useful for the bad guys. And so we really got to stay focused. This is for all the marbles. That's why there is a fake anti-vax movement in America. Boy, my throat hurts. So I've been trying a lot to try and explain that the twofold illusion of the pandemic is one. The twofold illusion of the pandemic is one of a PCR test that is not specific, and therefore most likely any number of these PCR tests, they understand very well how an existing irreducibly complex background of genetic signals could be reduced to a high fidelity PCR signal for a pandemic by simply rolling out a specific test. Now, the other thing that they knew was that there would be a good time to do this. To do this same stunt in 2024, a little difficult. Kind of missed your window. Do this stunt in, say, 2015, and it might not even really be possible. But with careful management of the healthcare system and of our old population, careful management of the expenditure of funds and therapies to extend the life of old people in America, without telling anybody that in the population pyramid there was this problem here. And this problem, once these people get to be retirement age, not only will they not be paying taxes, their fat salaries, their fat income tax, their capital gains tax, their property tax on their 5 houses, but they will start to draw down on that money that they've contributed instead. And so these bars, as they expand here, are anticipated rises in all-cause mortality that our ruling class has known about for decades and, in fact, has been planning. And that's why in 2019 and 20, they decided to do it then. That's why they decided to do it then, because this signal coming up right now was about to need managing. If they didn't do anything about it, these groups that fill old folks' homes and take up Medicare funding and cost sometimes, by some estimates, as much as $500,000 for the last 6 months of their lives. Well, that's a pretty big burden we could avoid if we could just, for a couple years, I don't know, stop using antibiotics for a wide variety of bacterial infections under the idea that it's primarily a viral syndrome. That's what this anticipated rise in all-cause mortality is all about. That's why we're talking about it right now. I don't know what I look like in the morning. I don't know what I look like now, but I've been to the gym already, and I've been back. And so if I look a little bit disheveled, it's because this is what I look like when I get back from the gym. You can actually see, am I using this one? I'll do like this, and then I can go over here. You can actually see I have my +4 Dukes on because I'm still in my shorts. So anyway, the point is that, sorry if I look a little tired. It's been a long day. It's been a long weekend. It's been heavy. This whole concept of how long we've been here now and how little progress is still being made. Mary Talley Bowden on Rogan was not very much progress. I'm not even sure how much progress we're making with Grace Shara's case and the idea of explaining, yes, Grace Shara is terrible, but then why is MD Breathe, Mary Talley Bowden, why is she not calling it murder? Why is she calling it intentional euthanization? That intentionally euthanized doesn't even make sense, because euthanization and euthanasia implies informed consent, usually of more than one person. So this idea that these people like Brett Weinstein and Chris Martenson and Dowd and Robert Malone and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the epidemiologist from Stanford, Jayanta Bhattacharya, and Nick Hudson, the actuary from South Africa, and all these other people like Jessica Rose, who's been working on VAERS for like 5 years now, is unaware that there are population pyramids, and unaware of Peter Zehan's work, where he's talked about population pyramids and how much trouble China is in. So we know, okay, we've got a list of things that people won't talk about or usefully explain and cannot connect them. One of the worst ones is the lack of antibiotic use, and the combination of that waiting in the background for anybody that was given supplementary oxygen when they walked in the door and said, you know, my pulse ox, I read online that the FLCCC said I should go to the hospital if my pulse ox is less than 96. So I'm here because my pulse ox is 94. I've been wearing this N95 mask all day, so I didn't think that I would get COVID, but you know, it's going down. It's almost at 90 now sometimes when I check it, so I thought I should come in. Well, sir, maybe we should give you some supplementary oxygen. And 2 hours later, he's got full-on ARDS, complaining about burning in his lungs, and they offer him a ventilator to make sure that it doesn't spread. Wow, it progressed fast, didn't it? And so everybody has a timeline. I can't stress enough how we need to do so much more work on timelines. One of the only guys that I know that does any resemblance of trying to do this is Mark Kulak. Mark Kulak of Housatonic ITS has done an exceptional job organizing the history of these people, and I think it's really important to realize that everybody has one of these. And if you look at these people who are behind Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and in his orbit right now, you will see a timeline that belies a collaborator or a person who's willing to look away while Americans are murdered and told around the world some story about what's really what pandemic is happening. Same thing they did with people in Scotland.
And then there are people who have inspired a lot of thought for me, people like J.J. Couey.
And so we have Nick Hudson all the way up to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Jayanta Bhattacharya, knowing that there's a guy out there saying some of these things and having no answer for them. Jayanta Bhattacharya can't explain to you why intramuscular injection is good in the following scenarios. Robert Malone can't explain to you why RNA can pandemic in certain scenarios. He can't explain to you why the population pyramid would have been relevant before the pandemic, and how a potential signal in the population pyramid could have been misconstrued as something that it wasn't, with using, I don't know, dexamethasone like a hammer on the immune system. And transfection is a very important word to use, because if you use the word gene therapy, then you're using such an umbrella term that it's like transportation. And so then you're so aspecific that if I'm trying to make the argument that we shouldn't make any more, 1100 cc motorcycles or bigger, unless they're touring motorcycles, and I say, well, I think, certain kinds of transportation are dangerous, and, transportation in general is really bad, and I don't want any transportation. That argument isn't going to work. It's too aspecific. And gene therapy is exactly what Robert Malone said when he came out and tried to spread the word and tried to be the good guy on Brett Weinstein. It's gene therapy, and it's not. Gene therapy implies that we have this autism spectrum disorder, and all of these things fit in it. Like we have this toolbox of gene therapy, and all of these things fit in it. So we don't have to be very specific, but we do. And the reason why we have to be very specific is because we've been using this toolbox for a long time. It's not a new toolbox. But one of the most damning ways that young children and young people and young parents have been misled as a result of the pandemic and the panic that it created and the confusion that it created is that somehow these new vaccines worked, kinda. That the new technology works, that in principle, it's a great idea and much safer than old vaccines. There is at least half of the world population in the West that thinks that. And that is precisely because gene therapy was used as a general term to imply a new field, a developing field, a technology desert that needed new ideas, that things hadn't been tried in yet. And finally, we got lucky and we had this stuff in development. We said, go for it, and it worked. And this isn't going away. And it won't go away until we start realizing, and people start to realize, that this was an old technology on the bench in academia, in use for more than a decade before the pandemic. And there are thousands and thousands of academic biologists, because it wasn't called transfection by lipid nanoparticle, it wasn't called transformation by adenovirus. Because they called them vaccines, the brightest academics in our universities failed to see the illusion, failed to see the lie, failed to see the bait and switch. There are academic biologists all around the United States and the world that work specifically on neurobiology that use adenovirus all the time. And for them not to understand that those were not vaccines, it's just inexcusable. And yet they are being excused, just like all the doctors in the United States and around the world are being excused. The doctors in the United States need to wake up and apologize, look at their records during, especially those of you that worked in hospitals, and see if in your hospital the protocol included supplementary oxygen as a standard. If it did, you probably committed murder. That's the reality of things.
We call it progress, but I think we have to confront what we've actually accepted and what we've done. Science and technology and so on have gifted us lives of comparative ease compared to the lives of people living in even the recent past. We've all got the wisdom of the ages in our pockets, and we have convenience, and everything's a click away. But in terms of
now, I don't really like this dude. I don't like his shtick. I don't like his softiness stuff, his scarves, but a lot of people do. And for a long time, I've already thought that he was part of this little show, and I'm sure he is now. But again, he's scripted, and he relies on the people that he interviews for his script. He relies on an occasional email for his script. He's not wise enough and smart enough to have done the requisite work to get where we are. The requisite reading, the requisite studying, the requisite note-taking and analysis to get where we are. And that's the way it is. And so we're either going to be alone with these truths, or we're going to have to find examples of when people walk right up to the brick wall and don't see it. And more importantly, examples of people walking right up to the brick wall and somebody like Brett Weinstein turning them around and making them walk the other way. And once you start to be able to see examples of this, you won't be able to look away anymore. The whole internet will be full of this shit. You will be shocked.
Progress, we're all stupid and without skills.
We're all
people
stupid.
Don't know anything. unless they look it up. And even at that, you have to know a certain amount.
He's not wrong. I mean, is he wrong? Of course he's not wrong. You got to think about the aggregate average person. And the aggregate average person justifies the way that our rulers appear to be ruling us. That's the part that bothers me the most about this conversation that I'm hearing here and that I heard here, is that these two guys, witting or unwitting, are basically going to make the same argument that somebody like, Jane Goodall would make. That, it'd just be better if we only had 500,000 people on Earth. Here it comes. It's about 4 minutes in when that happens.
And we don't have any skills. I mean, nobody could fix a lawnmower, far less their car. People can't make clothes to clothe their nakedness. People can't hunt for food. They can't grow. We've become... It becomes an interesting question. And I definitely think as well that we've passed the point where you used to be able to say, well, medicine has given us longer, healthier lives. I think we've even passed the tipping point on that one. I think we're living shorter lives. We're certainly unhealthier, even if they're keeping us alive for 70, 80, 90 years.
So medicine is what's supposed to keep us longer alive is already an awful assumption. And that's a guy who's totally trapped. He's been a skilled social media user, and his job for the last 5 years has depended on him thinking that whatever he's experiencing is progress and learning, and it's not. It was enchantment. So much enchantment now that he thinks that medicine is supposed to extend your life. I mean, medicine is now not extending our life anymore.
Even if we're living longer, though.
We're less, I think, cumulatively, for all of the aforementioned reasons, we're less alive than we used to be.
So are they trying to tell us that? Are they trying to convince us of that? Do they want us to feel that way? It appears that any of those things could be the objective here. And again, unwitting, witting, both unwitting. It's hard to tell. Lemmings behave like lemmings. They look like they're running no matter what they're doing, right? So these could be lemmings running, or they could be two. It's horrible.
Yeah, I agree. And we are degrading the quality of our lives through processes that are effectively automatic. And that concerns me greatly. That, for example, the enlightened perspective these days seems to be that the population gloom and doomers were wrong, which they were. And
so the population gloom and doomers are the people who said that the population was out of control and that the earth would be overrun with people, and then the earth would tilt and the North Pole would change. Now, that's not going to happen, of course. We know already the math isn't there because they spent a lot of time in the 50s, 60s, and 70s trying to convince people to stop having big families, and they did. They've gotten so good at it, they've convinced people not to be men and women anymore. And so let's see how well Brett covers this.
That actually there's no population problem at all, and that the more, the better. And I hear that and I just think this is the over-extrapolation from an insight. Yes, the gloom and doomers were wrong. However, the more people you pack on this, the example I use is Yosemite. And the claim I will make is that Yosemite has shrunk by 50% in my lifetime.
We shouldn't have as many people on the planet because Yosemite is crowded. There's too many people on Earth. Yosemite sucks now. Yosemite is being ruined because when I go to Yosemite, I run into people.
Well, it hasn't shrunk at all, but there are twice as many people on the planet, and there's only one Yosemite. So from the point of view of that Yosemite doing its role, it's twice as burdened. And we are doing that across so many domains that there's no thought. We've signed up for an economic system that effectively requires the population to grow.
So here he goes. Now he's going to tell you that he's an economist because he works on complex systems, because evolution is a complex system, and this guy's a shithead. Now, I mean that in the worst way possible. I think this is one of the worst Americans alive right now, and it's really a combination of fraud and also malevolence. And somebody or some people behind the scenes have really convinced this guy that he's much smarter than he is. And it is extraordinary because, again, it's herding cats, and he herds a lot of cats because the algorithms make sure that all the cats see him that need to.
Because economic growth is built in, or it is not even built in, it's assumed, which is part of why we're in such trouble when economic growth gives way and people's built-in expectations are violated. They become violent and dangerous. So
I don't know what he means. I don't know what violent and dangerous, I guess, is when people don't get the bread that they want, then they get violent and I don't know what he's talking about. But he is absolutely a fraud.
So the question is, surely there is a number, a population number, at which the effect on the planet is negative if it grows beyond that number. I've never heard a good discussion of what that number might be. Is it half of where we are? Is it twice where we are? It's not indefinitely growing. That will certainly be devastating.
Isn't the reality though that you're the scientist and the biologist here, but aren't we confronting population diminishing?
Yeah, we are.
Fertility and or the number of children being born is in steep decline, not just in the West where you might expect it given lifestyles and whatever contraception and all of the rest of it, but in the East, in Asia, the populations in some instances are falling faster than a piano out of a window.
And so you got to be careful here, right? Because he's bringing up something. It sounds like he's almost there. But what are the consequences of a population that is not having children? The consequences are, that you're going to have a rise in all-cause mortality because growth is built in. Growth is built in. And then underneath that, you're going to have the effects of the management of the family, the management of the economic pressure, the socioeconomic pressures that reduce the size of the family. And so he's kind of aware. But they seem to be grossly unaware of the basics of what a population pyramid is, and more importantly, what did it look like in 2018? What does it look like now? What does China's population pyramid look like? Should they also have an expected rise in all-cause mortality followed by a collapse? How long does that take? How long can they project it will be? And these two clowns will never get anywhere near it. So he's approaching the brick wall right now, aren't we? Aren't we having some kind of population collapse?
Sure.
So is population pressure really the burgeoning problem in the
what I'm telling you is these numbers right here, this rise behind me here, this is hardly anything. And so with a little sculpting and a little lies, this was how it was possible. The lies have to be told on podcasts by podcasters. They have to be told repeatedly by podcasters. That's why all these podcasters shifted to 2 or 3 shooters after Donald Trump's ear was nicked. That's why all of these people switched to everything they switched to in sync from 2020 until now. because it's supposed to be an illusion of consensus, an illusion of momentum, which has evolved into the illusion of a health freedom movement, that every time these people say the health freedom movement, they are conjuring it because it doesn't exist.
Medium-term future, is it not the loss of populations that's going to present challenges? Obviously, there are exceptions to that.
It isn't the loss of population that was presenting and could have presented huge challenges to places like Scotland, where the aging population was retired and drawing down taxes, not paying them, drawing down on medical costs, not paying into it, just like in America, just like in Japan, just like in the UK. And so what I think you see here is population management. And in America, they needed to do something extra awful, because in order to tell a story about a virus that everybody's vulnerable, everybody's got to get murdered. But they're not going to convince a bunch of 25-year or 30-year or 40-year-olds to go to the hospital in the middle of the pandemic, because that wouldn't have worked. So they let opioids go wild on our streets, and they had it already ramping up. At 2019, it was already on the way up. The slope was great, and then 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, awful. As far as I can tell, at least a million Americans were killed by that. 1 million. And a lot of them are young. And so what that did was provide a very strong signal in the all-cause mortality that ended up reducing the life expectancy in America, making it look like medicine is just failing, as this mouth breather just said a few minutes ago. Medicine, it looks like we've reached the limit on being able to provide a longer life expectancy. Ray Kurzweiler was wrong.
Places in Africa that are still growing like topsy, but it is the Malthusian nightmares, the population bomb, Ehrlich, and all the rest of it. Is it a realistic threat anyway?
Did they really just mention the book that I just read to you a few days ago? Did they really just mention this book? Yes, they did. In this podcast, does he really talk about narrative sculpting? Yes, he does. But the only person who's ever said that this narrative was sculpted using murder and lies is me. It's unfortunate, ladies and gentlemen, but what you see is the brick wall right here. Nobody else, unfortunately, has gotten this close to the brick wall with these people, where these actors are taking my language for the last 3 years and subtly incorporating it into their dumb shit show. And yeah, we have narrative sculpting.
At the moment.
The population bomb was wrong, but the sophistication that arises from
The
recognizing
population bomb was not wrong. The population bomb resulted in the population pyramid we have because they were very successful in convincing people that the population bomb was real. And so people stopped having kids. People accepted abortion. People accepted birth control as ways to avoid the population bomb. So the population bomb wasn't wrong. We were managed. That's why my brother and his wife aren't having kids. Because they've been convinced that that's the good thing to do for the environment and for the world. That's why a lot of families are only having one kid now. It's not only because it's harder and harder to afford children, which is kind of an illusion. If you have one, then, it's like, really, how much more food do you really need to make for a 4-year-old when you have a 4-year-old at the table already? Ladies and gentlemen, this is bullshit. The population bomb, this book, and the other ones that I've read are not wrong. They resulted in the societal shift and attitude in having big families exactly the way they should have with a doom and gloom book like this one. And we're still being told mythologies that are essentially our governing mechanism.
Recognizing this. You know what we need is more people. Really? Have you looked at the rate of consumption of the version of life that you're selling people? Have you looked at the capacity of most people to raise healthy children? So my feeling is this is not a...
So the capacity to raise healthy children has dropped off, and so we should drop it off even more. The arguments that he's making are incoherent, like they always are. But in this case, it's extraordinary because the population pyramid is the signal. The population pyramid is the reason. The population pyramid is and the pandemic was the answer. The population pyramid was the problem. The pandemic was the answer. And the Human Genome Project was the beneficiary. Palantir and any other company that has their hands on the data is the beneficiary. I mean, we can do connectivity between, let's say, all the Indians and all the people associated with Robert Malone, and how that all seems to be connected with Steve Bannon and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We could also talk about how Palantir has a Stanford Internet Observatory, where a lot of these Stanford people come from, and where Huberman still says that he's a faculty member, but he doesn't have a lab anymore. Larry Ellison donated to Stanford. I think Larry Ellison also is somehow related to this AI and the storage of data stuff. He's also related to Oracle, and Oracle is essentially the company that provides all the database solutions for the U.S. government. And so you could think about them having some Indian agents or something like that, but there's a lot of ways to look at this web of people, but there are very few ways to unsee the fact that Brett Weinstein's dad, that's Eric Weinstein's dad, worked with Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s dad to update the FDA in a way that probably was to the dissatisfaction of Estes Kefauver. And so this guy operating on this level of obfuscation on a direct, this is the only messages that I've had in the last 2 years. These 4. I've gotten it down to this many words. And so for him to be saying that the population pyramid is not a relevant signal is absolutely absurd. Especially when his guest obviously knows that something's going on. But see, the trick is they wanted the population to collapse. That was the whole point of releasing a book like this and then going on talk shows and making and writing editorials in newspapers and Time magazine for the next 20 years and discouraging people from having too big a family. That's the same reason why China instituted the one-child policy on the advice of, I guess, us. India didn't have a one-child policy. And so these people are wittingly or unwittingly, they are part of this now, and they need to be woken up to it. They need to be shamed of it. You know, they need to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that I'm so incompetent, that after 5 years of the luxury of having more than enough money for my family to travel all around the world, including going to Romania in 2023 in November, meeting Stephen Hatfill and Nick Hudson and Robert Malone and Jill Glasspool Malone and Meryl Nass and Denny Rancor and Jessica Rose and Ryan Cole, all over in Romania and Bucharest or whatever the hell, Budapest, whatever the place is called, all on stage together, reciting the narrative that they have made no progress on. And they knew that I was saying this already back then. I was still working for CHD back then.
A numeric parameter for one thing, I'm uncompelled that you can do the analysis on population. If one person is consuming effectively the resources of 10 or 20 people, if they, let's say, live in the first world, then
So this is a great reason to lie about the population pyramid so that you can tell a story about a novel virus, and in reality you're just murdering people because we have too many people.
and we can say, oh, population is crashing. Well, but it's not effectively crashing from the
It's not effectively crashing because people use too much stuff. This video is really, really awful. And Brett Weinstein's takes on things are really, really awful. I really think there is a way out. I really do think that there's a way out. It's this one right here. The population pyramid is what they should have been looking at and talking about and discussing with each other, and they weren't. If he would have looked at the population pyramid of Scotland, that Scottish man would be more than ashamed of himself, because the signal that's visible in this population pyramid was pretty absurd in the Scottish one. And that's why so many people were murdered in Scotland. And he should be just absolutely ashamed not to know that. It's an anticipated rise, ladies and gentlemen, an anticipated rise in all-cause mortality. RNA cannot pandemic intramuscular injection is dumb. Transfecting healthy people was always a crime. And I'm going to do something else for the way out, I think. Anyway, we're going to start this Biology 101 really soon now. I had a guest come over the weekend, and some inspiring things happened, some inspiring discussion. And I think I have my head organized in such a way that the short course on virology can now begin. And so I'm not exactly sure the timing of it yet. And so in the meantime, I'm just going to put a placeholder here to say that this will be a study hall week, and we'll do more things like this. Probably watching another video tomorrow for now, trying to get the timing right. But I think I'm ready, and I think most of the writing and note-taking and organizing of these ideas is done now. Unfortunately for the meddlers, I haven't typed really anything in, and so it's not really available for them anywhere yet, and so I think that's why there's a little bit of a holding pattern right now. But once we start teaching this stuff and getting this stuff out, I think things will become more interesting. So I got to give my voice a rest. It really feels like I have to push hard, so hopefully there's nothing going on there, and we will be back online in the morning. So I will see you. Remember, it was a national security operation from day one. What you've ended up accepting is PCR as a diagnostic standard, which is definitely bad. Accepting sequencing as a high fidelity measurement, also not good. Intramuscular injection is proven beyond question as a methodology, also definitely not true. And people like Brett Weinstein are not going to help us with that. RNA obviously has huge military potential. This is actually true because you can use RNA or DNA to produce a gold standard PCR positive. Trump was shot and the mystery was solved. America's health problems will be complicated to solve, and we should be happy with him already there. And of course, that's not true. I apologize. This is an old deck. But this is where we are. These people are how we got here. These are some of the, this guy, that dude up there, some of the worst Americans out there right now, because they are masquerading as something that they are not. And they're all basically on the same script, making sure, checking in, having table meetings. And we're wiping the floor with them right now. I'm very happy about that. But just keep in mind, I do think that the Trump shooting was likely faked in some way. I can't explain it any other way than my son goes to the same high school, and we still don't know anything about Matthew Crooks. He lived like 4 blocks away from my house, and that's just ridiculous. HHS Secretary as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is just a distraction. Marty McCary, for example, Jay Bhattacharya. Now Robert Malone is going to regain his reputation and get right back in the Ditra game, I guess. And solving America's health problems isn't on the agenda. It's collecting America's health data. And you can see that although he made a big press release about the AI infrastructure that he was going to build in the United States, he didn't make much of a press release about the budget that he submitted because he didn't submit one. I'm very happy that everybody joined me today. Thank you very much for being here. I'm sorry that I'm late. I'm not really sure why my voice is so bad right now, but it feels like I really got to push hard. So I am definitely going to get offline right now. Ugh. Thank you. I'll see you guys again soon.
I don't care how you get there. I don't care what you do to get there. Goals to what?